What's up, folks? Welcome back to stream. It's Wednesday. We've been graced by the Warhamster with some insane things to talk about, insane opinions from people that we get to discuss. Yeah, so I don't know. I'm excited. Hope you guys are ready for a show. Let's talk, first of all, about some updates to Warhammer 40k that have happened only today. I know someone's going to comment if I don't talk about these. There have been changes in the Warhamster community website. First one is kind of cool. Look, it's the templates to play Warhammer 40k 11th edition on. They just have them, and they have a bunch of different textures and stuff. I think that's rad. No notes, I guess. I think this is awesome. Easier access to this kind of material makes the game more accessible to new players. It makes it easier for people to design like competitive tables, to run events. This is sick. Also, there's like a bunch of different versions you could get. I don't know. I think that's awesome. So there's that. Cool. The other thing, of course, is that the new Exodites are available. If we can look at them. Thanks, Adobe Acrobat, for being just a piece of shit. Here we go. All the new Exodite datasheets are here. Look at them. They're so cool. Points have been released for these on the Munitorum Field Manual, and I think they are generally very reasonable. The Dragonites, importantly, are 30 points per model, which is a little bit, but like the stat block you get for them is pretty okay. They have 4 wounds apiece at T5, which is like not really a profile you get outside of like the, what do you call them, the Wraith stuff in Eldar. So I think that's pretty interesting. Definitely going to be some builds I think play them. The other thing too is that like they're actually, unlike Shining Spears, which is the easiest like example, the easiest comparison. They actually get attachments so they can like take enhancements and stuff, which you can't do with basically any of the other at least melee bikers. Like it sort of fulfills a role in Eldar that I don't think anything else really touches, which is like the ability to build this big melee brick with characters in it outside of like Uriel and like Void Scarred, I guess. But this is obviously going to go a little bit farther. So I don't know. I think it's pretty cool. I think they're probably going to be playable, and I definitely think there's going to be some Windrider host lists running some cool dragon guys. So yeah, that's fun. The Lay Stalker, I think, is a little expensive. The Stone Singer is only 60 points, which is good. The Lay Stalker comes in at 80, which is kind of a lot. I don't know if that guy's gonna be super duper useful. I mean, he is like lone operative. Maybe you play one in Windrider, but that's a tough like unit to cost because he doesn't do that much by himself, but he is like a useful body to have because he just like can't be shot as fast. So I don't know. The other attachment guy is only 60 points, so the full brick, if you want to play the whole thing, is 310, which is not too bad. That's not crazy. And being 4 wounds means they don't die to like random 3 damage blast guns and stuff. So I don't know. I think it's pretty cool. The Stalker's gun's okay. Where's that fucking guy? There he is. There's the Lays. God, this app is slow. Holy shit. It's like 2 shots, 3 damage, I guess. It's kind of inconsistent, so a lot of times you're like probably putting 3 damage onto something, which is okay. But I don't know if it's like I don't know if it's necessarily gonna like blow the world up if you get shot by a couple of Lay Stalkers. Like you might lose a Terminator or something. Which is, you know, not nothing, but it's not the most insane unit of all time. So yeah, no Exodites for Drukari, unfortunately. Just the Eldar stuff. Or Azyryani, excuse me. Azyryani. They're all Eldari, but these ones are Azyryani. Anyway, chat, that's all that I have to talk about in terms of that. Let's talk about some other things, of course. We have a couple of threads that I think are very funny, talking about new players getting into the hobby. There is, of course, our great the normal churn of drama within the Warhammer 40k community. But we begin with maybe the most controversial thread that we have ever watched, we've ever read through on this show of all time. Full stop. And that is the question. Do you track wounds remaining or wounds taken on your models? So when you suffer damage on a multi-wound miniature, do you mark the amount of damage that you suffered or the amount of damage that can be suffered before you die? One of life's great mysteries. Now, of course, the rules are sort of written to make wounds remaining valuable. So when you are tracking damage characteristics, for example, the damaged ability applies when you have a certain number of wounds remaining. There's a certain threshold of wounds that you're at, rather than wounds that are taken. So it would stand to reason that a lot of people end up doing that. But of course, it is not universal, and it's a big point of contention within the community generally. That what you should do. Remaining is the only moral decision. Everyone in chat says remaining. Let's see what people in the thread say. So this is a poll, and I did vote on the poll. Crabshroom over here says, I get irritated if an opponent does it the other way around. I can't remember how many wounds a Dreadnought has in total. Knowing it has taken 7 doesn't mean anything to me. And that's the crux of the issue. If you want to play Warhammer 40,000, presenting as much information to your opponent as possible, presenting them remaining wounds informs them both of wounds taken and wounds remaining. Informing them only of wounds taken gives them 1 point, 1 point of information there, because they do not know how many wounds are remaining unless they literally know your profile in and out. Now that said, there are arguments to be made to track the other way. The basically only one being is that it's easier. If you're like, well, I took 8, so I'll put a dice that says 8. Whereas, like, if you take 8 from a 12-wound guy, you're like, all right, I have 4, so I'll put a dice that says 4. So you save yourself a millisecond of time in order to elucidate the game state better for your opponent. That speaks to me, and I think one of the reasons this is so contentious, that there are people in the community I've spoken to these people, we've broken bread and shared a drink, who have told me I only ever display wounds taken. However, I will throw you directly under the oncoming bus. I think that means you are trying to deceive your opponent. If literally the only reason that you're gonna mark wounds taken is that it's slightly easier for you at the expense of your opponent, first of all, you're kind of a dick. Second of all, I think that to some extent you believe it is better for you to do for your opponent not to have perfect information about how many wounds a model can take before it's destroyed. I'll go on a limb and say that. I think you're an asshole. So Crabshroom here, very, very based for saying that they will get irritated. I made a point of repeatedly asking an opponent how many wounds his Dreadnought had remaining, as he insisted it was a better way. Super duper mad over here. Just annoy them into it not being more time efficient. That's fucking so funny. Let's see. One of my friends does wounds taken, and I have this conversation with him every time we play the tracking wounds remaining is more intuitive. It helps the game go a lot more smoothly. I asked him politely if he'll switch. Track wounds taken for a game and pretend not to hear him when he asks how many wounds something started with. Yeah, just like Uno reverse card. No. I don't. I take 8. Anything else is irrelevant information. Really, you should know how many wounds I have in total. So really, like, you should look up how many wounds you have to deal to kill me. Come on. If you track wounds remaining, you need to do the calculation once, each time the model is wounded. If you track wounds taken, if you want to know how much damage is needed to kill it, then you have to do the calculation every single time. There's enough mental in the game already. Wounds remaining is the only sensible way. I guess that makes sense. I don't know if that necessarily makes that much sense, but I guess it. You know how much damage. Oh, your opponent has to do the calculation every single time. Yeah. So if you track wounds taken, if you want to know how much damage is needed to kill a unit, then you need to do the calculation of wounds taken minus total health every single time, basically, is what he's saying. And I think that he is putting the onus of this, and I assume that the arithmetic would be that the onus of this is placed on the attacking player, right? Your opponent has to continuously do this like mental math. And it's like a death by 1,000 cuts, right? It's Warhammer 40k is a cognitively intensive game, and if you also impose an additional meaningless piece of arithmetic on your opponent every single turn, like, you may try to be gaining some advantage there. And I'm not going to necessarily say that I think people who do this are like actively trying to do that, but to some extent, you have to ask yourself if that is not a subconscious incentive for them, right? If they're just like, I'll just let my opponent do it or whatever, right? And you're like actually trying to essentially not necessarily hide information, but obscure information so that you have a greater chance of winning. I think that's fucking awful. You're a douchebag if you do that. The only counter uppers play Black Templars. Wow, we are crossing streams on fucking player stereotypes here today. Hot damn. Woo. Immediately use my own wound counters when someone else counts up. I moved them myself too. I'm not messing up because they're playing mind games and counting atypically. I've never had it said with this context. I will count down from now on. Thank you. Inky Campbell, we've steered you to the path of light. No one will think you're a dickhead anymore. As someone who also counts down, my thought process is just, well, that's the health bar. It seems most sensible. I was kind of surprised to see it wasn't the most common way to do it. Yeah, I think it's like OG. When everyone was tracking wound counters on like a D6 and everyone had 2 wounds, it didn't like really matter. Like in 3rd and 4th edition 40k, where I think a lot of the many of the cultural sort of practices that the community has right now were originally established. A character having more than 2 wounds was like kind of a big deal. And so you almost never had to track that stuff. It very rarely mattered for infantry anyway. And vehicles didn't even have health bars. So you never had this situation where you had a thing that had more than like 5 wounds on it. You had occasionally like some mounted stuff had multiple wounds, like Thunderwolf Cavalry, I think, or something, had like 2. Your characters would often have 2 or 3. And then like every once in a while there was like heavy infantry that had like 2 wounds. Like Tyranid Warriors had 2 wounds. And then everything else was like a monster had 5. And then a vehicle didn't even track wounds at all. So we didn't have this like, there wasn't this necessity to like track 20 wounds or 25 wounds or 30 wounds or whatever all at once. So I think that there are definitely groups who have this like ingrained practice to just count wounds taken, because 90% of the time in the past, it would be like, if I take 1 wound and I take another wound, I'm going to die anyway. So it doesn't matter what this says. I just have to indicate that they are wounded. Whereas nowadays, like knowing the exact wounds count is incredibly important. And so disabusing people of that is, I think, very important. It strikes me as slimy play to assume your opponent will have an encyclopedic knowledge of units not in their army, and playing wounds taken seems obtuse. Pretty sure it would be generally considered against the spirit of the game, if not outright discouraged by rules as written. I think that's very fair. Especially now that like wounds characteristics are kind of all over the place. One thing it struck me at a game over the weekend at Losar Open was like somebody was playing, it was Darkflight Pursuit, and they had a bunch of different land speeders, and their opponent, they and their opponent trying to keep track of which land speeder had between 9 and 11 wounds was like, oh, which one is that one? Can I bring it down that one? No. How about this one? No. That one I can though. They look the same, but at least I could get, that one is 10 wounds, so I could kill that one for bring it down. Fucking annoying. Like the fact that wounds characteristics are all over the place now does make it so much more difficult to actually sort of understand a game state, for sure. I'm looking for someone in here who can give me a good justification to play wounds taken. Wounds taken doesn't make any sense. Blah, 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 blah. The thread has opened my eyes. I think it seems like everyone who tracks wounds taken and not wounds remaining, it just does it out of habit and didn't ever think about it. I've always counted up, but I've also never been called a psychopath so often in my life. Incredible. Well, now you know. Why did you count up? I can't think of any reason other than trying to hide public information. It's just the way we always did things in the past. Yeah, I guess it's just like ingrained knowledge. Fascinating, chat. Absolutely insane. This is so interesting. Everyone says wounds remaining. Well, that's good. Hopefully, we can slowly eradicate all of the people who count wounds taken up. Occasionally I'll count wounds taken if I'm transitioning between like counting devices. So if I like have to track that I took a wound, and I don't have like my dial out yet, or I'm out of dials, so sometimes I'll like put a die next to the model, but then I'll replace it with their remaining wounds as soon as they have the tool for it. That does happen, but I always elucidate to my opponent like, hey, I'm gonna put a 1 here because I've taken 1 wound and I just haven't like I have to go dig for my dial to like track that I have 19 wounds remaining because I started with 20 and I took 1, and then I'll switch it out later. But I've like not really. I have met people who do it for like every single interaction, but I've never really done that myself ever. Absolutely fascinating. This guy has made specific trackers that say wounds left so that their opponent doesn't even have to know. I love it. Dislike the size of most wound trackers. They take up too much space on the board. The problem is that, so you can get teeny wound trackers that are like an inch in diameter for like infantry and stuff. If you need to do a wound tracker for any large model that's like above 10 or 12 wounds, then it gets really, really tough to do it on the little tiny one. So you need a bigger system. There are like other ways to do it. You can get clickers that can click up or down, like mechanical clickers. Those are pretty cool. As a smaller sort of version of a wound tracker, but it does get mechanically kind of complex. I do understand the people who don't like necessarily playing with wound trackers, but I do highly recommend that if you are wondering what you should use to mark wounds, wound trackers are and dials like this are so much more, especially the ones that lock or that like ratchet. Those are so much more reliable than dice, because dice get knocked and they get fucking rolled and they just don't say the same thing at the end than they did at the beginning. So I always recommend you use that kind of stuff. Good stuff, chat. I think that's good. So anyway, I figured we would start with a bit of a controversial thread. You know, rip that Band-Aid right off. Justification is you just started playing 40k and came from AOS, and AOS tracks damage taken. Well, AOS is not very good, and very few people play it, so I don't know. Is that a good barometer? I don't you know, they have good models, I guess. That's kind of cool. Clickers are cool, but too big. You can get kind of small ones, but you're right. They are pretty big. Anyway, chat. AOS explicitly states to count damage up in the rules. Oh, it's because that's what it tracks for like wounds remaining, right? I don't know anything about Age of Sigmar besides the very few games that I've played of it. Like because it's like damage thresholds track at a certain number of wounds taken. Kind of annoying. Weird. Anyway, it is what it is. Let's talk about some other stuff. I want to talk about some new player experiences because I think that is important in Warhammer 40,000 to increase the size of the community. We'll talk about a classic style of thread to get ourselves into the mood here, chat. Let's talk about, this is from a year ago, James D, who feels discouraged after playing a game. which is never what you want to see if you're a new player. Sometimes you can feel discouraged because you're having a tough time winning competitive games Warhammer 40k. That makes sense. It's a complex game, and it will take some time. Sometimes you can feel discouraged after people are assholes to you, and those are the people we want to run out of the community because they suck. James D says, "I'm a relatively new player, just coming up to a couple of months now. Still learning the rules. I had a game today and left me feeling pretty upset overall. Not to sound dramatic, I just wanted to hear your thoughts because I'm feeling pretty discouraged. The long story short is my opponent treated the game like a competition. He was doing things I didn't know about, not informing me about them. For example, I didn't know what coherency was. I think this showcases to us, Chance, that this is an incredibly new person, right? Coherency is it's like page 2 of the rules. If you read the rule book, it's in section 1 as a core concept that is always governing gameplay in Warhammer 40,000. If you are new enough that you do not know what coherency is, you are very new. I didn't know what coherency was. He said I needed to remove a model. I asked if I could just move it back into position. He said no. Insane. I made another mistake with terrain, as I didn't know I had to be wholly within to shoot. This was in 10th edition, obviously, being a year ago. So you had to be wholly within to shoot out, but if you were touching it, you could shoot in. This is a person who doesn't know what coherency is. You cannot expect them to know the ins and outs of the movement and shooting rules. Insane. He didn't allow me to change the movement. Wild. So we're like dealing with just an incredible disjunction here between these two players. This is a person who is probably on like his first 5 games, right? Versus someone who very much wants to win and treat the game as if it is a no takesy backsies super serial business kind of thing. And this is, like, to be clear, a level of like rules adherence you don't even get in like high level competitive play. If we were to go to the WTC next week and we saw interactions like this, oh, I'm sorry, man, I just noticed my dude is slightly out of coherency. Do you mind if I shift it? I guarantee you, it is WTC. So I was gonna say, I guarantee you no one in that building would say no. That's definitely not true. I guarantee you at least one person at the WTC would allow you to take that back. And for WTC, that's really saying something. If you went to the event that I live streamed over the weekend, Lone Star Open, and you asked basically literally anyone in that room, they would say, yeah, whatever, dude. I don't give a shit. I wasn't even paying attention. Same thing with shooting. Oh shit, I meant to be in this line, but I didn't do it right. I had movement, like I started over here. Can I just like shift to the model? Yeah, sure, man. Whatever. I don't care. That's fine. Or it's like, oh, I didn't mean to be touching that terrain feature. Do you mind if I push out? So, I thought I had line of sight, but I don't. So you mind if I just like be behind the line? I don't know anyone in the competitive community who would not accede to that request. So this is like a level of rules judgment that you don't even see at competitive games. He's not even playing against someone who's treating it like a competition. He's playing against somebody who's treating it like a death race. Yeah, absolutely insane. Fucking wild. Guy he's playing probably feels amazing for beating someone who didn't even know what coherency was. What a guy, dude. He certainly earned that victory. Insane, dude. Yeah. Like this, you can run into situations like that, right? Where your opponent's like playing. I am subject to this occasionally. If I rock up to a game and my opponent's playing like cutting edge meta stuff, I'm gonna be like, all right, man, clearly you know what's up. If you're like, oh, back 6 months ago you were playing like Gladius Task Force with Victrix Honor Guard. Okay, dude, I see what it is. But I rock up to a game, my opponent goes, how does line of sight work? The tenor of the game has shifted. We are no longer playing to win. We are playing to instruct. Even if it's a tournament like situation, right? I show up and it's in a G tier, an RT tier, or something, and my opponent does not know what's going on. Then I feel that as a baseline human, right? Just anyone who is a part of this community should feel, to some extent, obligated to inform them of the rules. You know, you don't have to play their game for them. None of that stuff. But help them through it, right? Because the community is going to be better off if they have a good time. Maybe this guy was playing, like, Ultramarines Gladius Task Force. Fucking back in a year ago, probably like, I don't know, November or something. Maybe he's like, he's got 2 Repulsor Executioners and the Armor of Antoninus guy and Marnius Calgar, and his opponent's like, oh my god. maybe there's a whole extra layer to this we're not getting, but I sincerely doubt it. I don't think somebody who doesn't know what coherency is up to date on the meta army builds. Fucking incredible. He charged me and he killed a model. I declared I would fight on death. Beforehand, he said I couldn't because I'm not basing it. I don't even know what that's referring to. This is like obviously in 10th edition fight on death rules, which allowed you to pile in when that model fought. So it didn't matter if you were basing or not. He then heroically intervened for the purpose of cutting off my models from basing who I charged. A very valid play, but if you are someone who doesn't know what coherency is, you might not be aware of the intricacies of the fight phase. So then I couldn't make attacks with the whole squad on the initial target. I didn't even know this was possible. I haven't read page 2 of the rules. I don't know what the stratagems are. He survived, fought back and fell back and shot and then wiped me out. I felt like he should have told me this was possible in the first place, so I could have at least attempted to do something about it. Yeah. Insane for you to be playing against somebody who's this obviously new and then bait them into a heroic intervention. That's fucking wild, dude. It absolutely incredible. Like, that's a thing where you're like, oh, I have this unit positioned here and this unit positioned here, so I can do a thing called heroic intervention. And you tell them at the start of the charge phase so they know. And then now they're learning, and now they're like, wow, this game has so much play and counterplay. It's so interesting and cool. I feel like I have taken my first step into a wider world, and I'm interested to play more games of Warhammer 40,000, the miniature game. But instead, they came to Reddit and made a thread about how shitty the game was because you were an asshole. What the fuck? Overall, I felt I just wanted to have fun, and he was doing things without telling me, and me having no idea what he was doing. It wasn't fun at all. It was a pretty awful game. Am I being too sensitive? No. You were playing against a fucking dickhead. Should I have done something differently? It made me feel really crappy, and I didn't want to play my other game coming up in a couple of days. I am sorry that you feel that way a year ago. I hope that you have gotten over this. James D. number 80. It sounds like the community has rallied together and given them a lot of positive messages, which is pretty good. I was pretty upset at the time and after the game. Yeah, absolutely insane. Fucking unhinged behavior from his opponent. Just wild. Also, this is like, the implication here, of course, is that it might be league play or something. I don't know, so I don't know if there's anything on the line. But in any case, it's like it's likely that you're just playing a pickup game. And there's literally nothing on the line besides your fucking ego, my guy. So, like, give it a rest, bro. What the fuck? These people astound me. That's absolutely insane. Pretty wild. The opponent probably tracked wounds taken. He was just doing things I didn't know. I didn't know what he was doing. Fucking wild. Absolutely insane. Absolute worst is allowing someone an obvious take back. Next turn I ask for one, he demands a roll off before allowing. That is, like, definitely frustrating. It can be the case though that, like, they don't consider them to be on the same level and stuff. That's always, like, takebacks are always sort of a whole can of worms for sure. Once played against a 15-year-old dude. It was his first tournament at an RTT. I won easily, but had to definitely try to teach him. Yeah, I'm not saying you need to, like, lose to these people, right? Like, if they're really new, like, what you should try to do is get them into a board state where they feel that they have a chance to win, and that if they learn and get better, then they could win the next time, right? And then they're more incentivized to come back and play. And yeah, I feel like that's the baseline. But like, don't lose to them on purpose. That's almost worse. If you're like, oh, you played so good and all my guys died and I forgot to go on all the objectives. No. And then they're just like, okay, well now you're just handing me a game. That's stupid. But if you're like, here's like a close game and we both you scored a bunch of points and I scored a bunch of points and I won at the end, but like here's some things you could have done differently, and then they take that and internalize it. Suddenly they're thinking about the game and now they're more excited to play the next time. Like you want to engender that level of excitement for the game, you know? You want to establish or inform their creativity. So, yeah, pretty wild. Always check my opponent is briefed to the latest on the latest quantum physics. Never used for the game, but I don't want to be the guy that gets caught out when they try to math dice rolls. I don't understand what you're talking about here. Fucking wild, dude. It's a setup for a plot twist for the opponent. Comments here. The situation turned out to be completely different. For sure, that could definitely happen. There are that is always a danger when we sort of talk about these threads that have you know, only one side of a story, for sure. It could definitely be that the guy was like, that this new player was like just, you know, throwing racial slurs the whole time, and the other guy just wanted to get out of the store as quickly as possible, or whatever. But you know, we'll give them the benefit of the doubt for sure. Incredible. Well, the opponent seems to be that guy. The player should have read the basic rules or watched some videos to understand the basics of the game. Well, I mean, to some extent, sure. But when you are playing a game with someone who is like objectively new, and honestly, like it doesn't seem like they, in this case, right, they had enough going on that you know, they were doing things. They were moving and they were shooting and they were charging and stuff like that. They didn't know what I imagine was that they knew that their models had to be within 2 inches of each other, but they didn't know like what a coherency check was and when that occurred, right? And what could force it. And also the tough part with Warhammer 40k is if you're new to the game, you may not actually know how to describe the mechanics that you're running into, right? You're like, my opponent told me I had to remove models at the end of the turn and I wasn't sure why. And you're like, yeah, that's because it's a coherency check, which is caused by models being removed from 2 inches of one another over the course of taking casualties over the round and not having an opportunity to remove into coherency. If that doesn't happen, then you force a coherency check. This guy probably doesn't know what that was, so his opponent just goes, oh, coherency, you have to kill that guy. And he's like, why? And they're like, well, it's not within 2 inches. And he's like, oh, okay, I guess so. So I think I would give the OP here the benefit of the doubt that they know the very, very basics, but maybe they're not like a level in. But if you're 3 or 4 games in to Warhammer 40k, I don't know necessarily if it is fair to assume that you know every core rule, right? The core rules are really long and there's a bunch of shit. And if you haven't played miniature games before, they, you know, it's a lot. And if the purpose of you playing is learning, then I think it's reasonable to assume that you don't know like the intricacies of moving into base contact with a heroic intervention, that preventing pile-ins and stuff. So I don't know. Can only remember one time I denied a take back, and it was after he deliberated on the choice for a minute, made the choice. I told him what I was going to do based on both things. Told him what I was, or what he could do. I don't understand. I don't think I misread. Yeah, the couple months thing is interesting for sure. I think that probably means that he's like been in the hobby for a couple months, which means he's been like building and painting an army, but I doubt he has many games in, right? Because like it's easy to conflate game experience with like doing all the other shit, right? It's like I've had a 40k army for 2 months. But I've played 2 games because I've built and painted the army, which is like a 30-hour commitment. So I don't know. If it would be easier if he was like, this is my 5th game or something. That would be easier to judge, I guess. But I'm gonna give the OP the benefit of the doubt here for sure. Gave him both things you would do based on his choice. Oh, like how you would react to his take back? Fair enough. I get it. If the opponent is getting opponents, if the OP is getting opponents like this, no wonder he hasn't learned the game. Yeah, for sure. If his opponent is just telling him rules that happen without exactly explaining why that happens, then yeah, for sure. If you fall back, I'll do this. If you don't, I'll do something else. He made the choice, but then went and take back. Oh, after like you told him what would happen if he did a thing, and then that thing happened, and then he was like, "No, I don't want to do that." That's fair enough. That is pretty wild. I definitely have like denied people at takebacks before, but usually it's like if they misunderstand something or make a mistake, and it's like way far later. People will be like, "Hey, can I correct my movement from like a full round ago?" And you're like, "Well, I don't know." So you've done your entire shooting phase. Like, we'll see. If it's not something that if it's like something like, "Oh, can I move this tank into line of sight of you after all my shooting is done?" You're like, well, you didn't know that these other things wouldn't kill me, so that's a lot of information you've gained. If you're the opponent, you'd switch to teaching mode. Yeah, I think like that's like I said, right? I think that is the kicker. It's not in the narrative that is being presented by this post here. The first interaction that occurs is that this dude ends with a unit out of coherency, and his opponent immediately just tells him he has to coherency check and lose models. Instead of like being like, "Oh, well, you took this casualty over here, so like if you had just taken it on this guy and like maybe you lost your special weapon or something, then like you could remain in coherency, you don't have to remove anyone." And they're like, "Oh, okay, cool." Right? And regardless of this person's level of experience, if you are playing someone who doesn't have that baseline knowledge, you should feel like you should teach them. Right? I feel like that it's common courtesy. Teach them what's going on. It doesn't seem to be like a controversial statement, I think, for sure. Something happened in a casual game. Your opponent didn't explain things to me. He claimed he could shoot. He could see your Martarian through the wall by the tip of his wing. Martarian doesn't have frame. It was a terrible game. Oh, like he was outside a ruin, but his wing was over the ruin, so your opponent claimed he could shoot him. Yeah, that shit's so stupid. Like not only is it an annoying rule that's hard to track, but also it's like people trying to angle shoot, and it's like, oh, I can shoot Mortarion so I can kill him before he does anything. Well, it's like, cool. So you want an experience of a game where your opponent like makes a stupid, silly mistake and then loses their most important piece for it. Like, what use is that game if that happens, right? Like, suddenly you both have wasted a bunch of time because your opponent doesn't get an interesting game and you don't get the experience of playing against somebody who's actually playing in their A game. Especially in practice games, it's like, what the fuck, dude? Absolutely nuts. Mentor told you to just call it and leave. You're like, all right, man. Can I? You're clearly wrong, but like, what if I just rotated my wing? No, all right, we're good. we don't have to play this game anymore. All right, chat. Should we move on to the next thread? That's a good one to start our discussion about teaching new players. Let's talk about this one from just today. This is a topic that's near and dear to my heart personally, as someone who very much enjoys doing exactly the opposite of what this thread is. Pizza Dog 39 says, "Can we stop advertising to new players to not buy the books? Please, please, please. Daddy G-Dub needs codex money. New players need to buy codexes. We're at the start of a new edition. I see a lot of new people are coming into the hobby. First of all, great. I saw a ton of people in the chat over the weekend that were brand new. Fucking awesome. Welcome in, everyone. I hope you're having a good time. In those newbie posts, I see a lot of people directing them straight away from buying rule books and codexes. First of all, the rule book is already outdated. It was outdated day one of release. And aiming them towards Wahapedia or other apps. Don't get me wrong, educating new people that those options exist is a good thing, especially because this hobby is expensive to get into. First of all, You have already countered your own argument. Hey, Cody, thank you for the membership. I've had memberships for 2 years. I've had memberships for ages. Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Like, this hobby is very expensive. So why are we encouraging people to spend money on useless paper that's outdated versus cool miniatures that they'll enjoy and get to play more games with? Come on. But in my humble opinion, actively discouraging people from buying the books is robbing them from a core experience of the hobby. I have an interesting thing to say about this. I have an opinion. What makes Warhammer so great is not just the game itself, but the whole experience. Finding out the lore through the books and art is a big part of that, which shouldn't be left out. With all of that, it would just be another tabletop game. I have a bad news for you, Pizza Dog. It is a tabletop game, so I'm sorry. And when it comes to just the game, there are lots of options to find out. There are lots of options out there that are more refined. So what you're saying is that we should send players to a different game, I guess. Probably counter to your argument. Now, as a little child, so what Pizza Dog is saying here is essentially like, hey guys, don't you remember how fun it was to buy a new army book and read through all the lore and look at all the painted miniatures and stuff? That was pretty cool. I agree. Pizza Dog 39, you're not wrong. When I was a little boy, I loved doing that shit. I'd buy White Dwarfs with my fucking paper route and my lawn mowing money, and I would fucking buy an army book or a codex, and I would read it, and I would be like, wow, look at all these cool things. Here's the difference, though, and I imagine that Pizza Dog 39 has had a similar rose-tinted experience to myself, where he looks back with nostalgia glasses at the times where he was sitting in some sort of rope swing in the back acre, reading through Warhammer Armies : Beasts of Chaos or something, and being like, wow, aren't these amazing? However, the world has changed quite a bit. I don't know if you have noticed, but I have seen that in the last, I don't know, call it 20 years, the world is a little different than it was. Just a little bit. And the way that people absorb information, and especially like younger people who are newer, is not, sitting on the back lot with a lemonade reading the army book. Most of these people who are getting into Warhammer 40,000 are actively being exposed to lore through YouTube videos and podcasts and, audiobooks and all this other stuff. It is no longer an ecosystem where your sole gateway into the universe is an army book that you purchase. And at the same time, that army book that you purchase is also actively absorbing resources you could be spending on playing the game, and also making the game worse. Can we talk about that for a moment? The biggest issue with Warhammer 40,000 in general is the codex release cycle. It's fucking awful. Now, I do have, I've been told, and I know this is obviously like a huge grain of salt, but that Games Workshop is very slowly moving away from in-print media. And hopefully that's true. Fucking we'll see. And moving more towards like digital distribution stuff. They have moved to, they're in the future, I guess, planning on moving printed media to be like more on demand. So they're going to print on demand rather than making normal cycles. I don't know if that's actually the case. That was just what somebody told me, that somebody told them down the grapevine. Who knows? I also don't know if that's necessarily the case for codexes. However, I do think that direction is generally positive. For all of the reasons that I'm sure will be covered in this thread. Codexes are expensive. Codexes are not useful game tools. And while codexes are cool to have, the information presented by a codex is now freely available elsewhere. And someone who is getting into the game will almost certainly have absorbed that information from one of those other sources. So I think that we are nostalgic in this thread for a medium of immersion that is becoming less and less relevant as the years go on. Also, codexes are a fucking scam. So If I was new to the game, I would be fucking upset that I purchased codexes. You know, this other thing too is like the people who have been in the game for a really long time, right? Back in the day when I was looking at my Codex Tyranids 4th edition, you'd buy that Codex Tyranids 4th edition and it would be good for 5 years or whatever. The release cycle of editions, which was much shorter or was much longer, excuse me, they just didn't update anything. Like nothing ever fucking got errated. So your book was good. The game was fucked, but as a kid you didn't know that, so it didn't matter so much. However, that's not the case anymore. Now, if you buy the codex and you go, oh, I'm going to go to the army builder, and you go to the army builder to build your army, the things included in the codex that you are reading your rules from are different than they are in the army builder, right? If I look at, like, literally last week, Raven Wing command squads changed how they attach to units. So if I'm building my army, and I'm like, how come I can't just take a Raven Wing command squad? How come it has to attach to the unit? Oh, well, it got the support keyword in an update last week. And you wouldn't know that unless you looked at the digital files. So they're way less valuable than they were. Let's talk about the discussion. Sorry distribution, 140. The exact demographic we're talking about here. I'm a newbie. I almost finished painting my sister's combat patrol, but I am hesitant. First of all, congratulations. That's awesome. I'm hesitant to buy the codex because I read somewhere that they'll get a new one in less than a year. And I don't expect to have 1,000 points until winter anyway. Obviously, the response is it could be a year, it could be 2 years. We don't even know. It could be anything. But at the end of the day, you're going to spend an expensive amount of money, probably $60, for a thing that you may not get use out of. With new editions, armies get new codexes. What's useful is the code, so you have the rules in the app, but it's not worth a full army book. If you want a collectible, you should buy the book. I agree with that. I think they're cool. They are a cool thing to have. But if the thing itself doesn't have value to you, you should not buy it. That is capitalism. That's how a barter economy works. I guess it's not a barter economy, right? What are we, like a fiat economy? But not anymore, because our currency is valueless. I don't know economic stuff. I don't know how money works. Somebody tell me. I do that for my army. It's just really just for the collection aspect. As I use the app, it's way better. Unfortunately, there's no way to get the code without buying the book, which is, of course, part of the scam. Fucking awful. All right. There is a post here that I want to talk about, which is, I think, very good. Here we go. This is a good one. Valanen says, I think any newbie who buys the book and a starter set struggles to paint their figures for 6 months and then realizes their books are now outdated and need to be replaced will be more discouraged. Immediately, Silly Mattface says, I was going to buy the Thousand Suns Codex after getting back into the hobby last year. Then a bunch of stuff was changed immediately after it came out, so I could not be bothered. That's $40 better spent on miniatures. 100%. Probably easier for a total newbie to follow everything in a physical book, but I've been happy using free resources. Oh, Pizza Dog has been fucking ratioed out of existence. Yeah, you are not the audience I'm targeting with this post, and your money is probably better spent elsewhere. Okay, man. That is exactly the person you're talking about. What the fuck? I was going to get back into the hobby, but the codex was useless, so I decided not to buy it. A good argument for not buying the codex. No, I didn't mean you, though. Jesus Christ. Annihilator NYT, congratulations. You become the very thing you're rallying against. Telling someone who's unfamiliar with the game versus telling somebody who's unfamiliar with the changes to not buy codexes is exactly the same thing, yet here you are. Response to that is the original thread, the thing where you are discouraged for having the codex outdated by the time you paint your models. Holy shit, that is my exact experience. This thread is just simply proving why this whole idea is just generally bad. It's the experience of many people. It's why many of us advise new players to start slowly and in manageable chunks to limit discouragement. And one of the ways that you can also limit your discouragement is not spend money on in-print media that has no value outside of its intrinsic value, or it's extrinsic value. Is that what it is? When it's an emotional value, right? Where it's cool. Getting fucked over by Games Workshop is a core experience of the hobby. It's hard to argue with that. Guys, I once too bought a codex that was useless and immediately got outdated. Why don't you all also do that? How come we don't just ignore the fact that happened to me and everyone else and we had a really bad time? And instead we let everyone just get fucked. Absolutely incredible. If you're going to advertise buying a codex to a noob, do it from the approach of here's a cool book for getting the lore. The rules will change the updates. 100%. Like, I don't want to discourage people from buying codexes, period, right? You should buy codexes if you want them, right? But if I am a new player and I am saying I want to go play Warhammer 40,000, what should I buy? I will say, don't bother buying the codex. Buy other stuff. The codex is a fun art book that has lore in it and pictures of cool miniatures. If you want that, you should buy it. But if your goal is to play the game, then it is baggage you don't need. Throw it away. Throw it into the garbage. Pathetic Cards over here feels very strongly about this and has been massively upvoted. I'm sorry, but the new players are the ones that need to hear it the most. Codexes these days are an absolute luxury. They are extraneous purchases, and I'm absolutely going to tell a new player, you do not need to buy this $70 rulebook before you can play the game. Focus on getting your army together. It's plenty expensive already. Fucking preach, my guy. If the codexes were more than a shadow of what they used to be, I might feel differently. But I don't even want my codex anymore. There is so little lore, so little art. Less of it is new in 10th edition codexes than the ones from even 9th edition. I don't even like them as coffee table books anymore. I would literally rather continue my quest to get a complete set of 9th edition books than buy even one 11th edition codex, and I have 6 armies. I will probably wind up buying codexes as I play armies, but literally just for the convenience of using the GW app. The books themselves suck. Fucking preach. Interesting stuff, chat. Marbo have 3 codexes, did not buy one they were gifted. There you go. If it's free, it doesn't matter. But it's great. It's a great thing to get for free, that's for sure. So digital code for the rules will be done with it with the books unless you want lore and art. 100%. I mean, that's what people have been asking for a million years. Like, literally, the amount of money that I know a lot of people would pay, myself included, to subscribe to all the rules on a monthly basis would be a lot, right? Like, give people, I don't know, a 60-day free trial and then charge them fucking $15, $20 a month. It's a lot, but if people are in franchise, they would do it. And if they take a break, they can just cancel the subscription. You make so much more money off people doing that, and you literally have to do nothing. It's like a money printer that Games Workshop could at any time turn on that they just simply don't want to. I don't understand it. I just don't get it, chat. Fucking wild. Absolutely insane. Games Workshop said 11th edition codexes have a lot of lore in the QA stream. Do we believe them? I don't know. I mean, I guess how much is a lot? What is a lot compared to? Do they have a lot of lore compared to the datasheet? Probably. The datasheets sometimes have one sentence on them. $5 US a month for all codexes is much more than 70 USD a one-time purchase every 3 years. Yeah, 100% for sure. Yeah, even $5 is more than they would make off 99% of the population. But I'm saying they could upcharge it, right? They could allow their corporate greed to get the better of them and charge 3 or 4 times as much of that. And I think most people would pay that. And that's just like, I'm just being honest. And instead of getting $0 from people, they would get all of the dollars for free. And it makes no sense that they continue with the system that they currently have. Like, I just don't understand it. I just don't understand it. Warhammer Plus gives you all the rules. Yeah, I mean, it should, realistically. You're basically paying like $6 a month for a miniature and then nothing. It's fucking such a hack subscription. Fucking wild. The codex should have 2-3 free months. Yeah, exactly. You know, for sure. So like there are a million ways to do what they want to do more easily. But they won't do it. They don't do it. They still tie it to this book thing, and the book thing is an actively bad purchase. And if your goal is to play the game and you're looking to maximize your hobby dollars, books are not the place to put them. This guy fucking got him. Tomorrow's Trash Miniatures. Nice try, Gibbs Workshop book salesman. Got him. There is no practical reason to buy books. It's part of how Games Workshop keeps people from entering this hobby. One PDF rulebook with all the unit information is all that would be required. You should be pissed you have to buy it all separately. Yeah, for sure. The hobby is about modeling and throwing dice. It's not about spending money for the sake of spending money. There is value to buying. So, Hafad says there is value to buying a codex. It's just not recommended as an early purchase unless the codex is released recently enough to give at least the rules section that isn't too far off. But otherwise, the lore and art section is really good, and at some point you would need the code for list building convenience anyway. I can use an alternative though. You could use a new recruit or whatever. But it's nice to have a big book with cool lore stuff, so you feel inspired painting miniatures and kit bashing and making up crappy backstories for them. The response is, yeah, there is value in owning books. The rules are the last reason that I buy a codex for, though. For sure. No one's saying that the codexes are totally worthless entirely, but if you don't need them at the time and you don't feel that like you would be enriched by the lore and artwork inside them, then you should not purchase them. The whole point is that if someone is looking to play the tabletop game, they should be actively disincentivized from buying the books. If their goal is to spend their money the most as efficiently as they can to play a game of Warhammer 40,000, the books are almost certainly the worst way to spend those dollars. Fucking wild. A lot of people really do not learn from Steam. Piracy is for a lot of people a matter of convenience. 100%, absolutely, yeah. The only reason that resources like 39K Pro and Wahapedia exist is because Warhammer's rules distribution engine is so fucking atrocious. It's insane. And to some extent, the only reason that there is like a viable third party market for miniatures is that a lot of the miniatures can't be gotten easily. And so even if you extend outwards from just books, the Games Workshop does to some extent lose control of their market share because of how difficult it is to get, access to some of these things, from rules to specific miniatures. Yeah. If you turn up to a game using unpainted miniatures, can you use 50 Shades of Grey as a codex? No, Pebcac, because that's only one shade of gray. Come on. If Wahapedia went on and add Hellscape on mobile, yeah, for sure. Well, there's other tools. So, 39K is not perfect, but it's fine. I use these guys if I don't have access to the app. So, for example, when I'm running this weekend, when I was running the stream on my laptop, I used 39K as a rules resource. It does have errors in it, unfortunately, or it misses content. Like, it just doesn't include all the words sometimes, which is very weird. So it's not totally perfect, but it is mostly a data rip from the official app. And so this is good if you're on a mobile. If you're on a phone, you can just access this real quick. So if you're I need to know what my fucking, I don't know, Biologus Putrefier hits on, I can see his weapon profile here, or I can see his abilities and stuff. So this is good for quick reference. I do like this one play quite a bit. Also, most places like New Recruit, etc., when you build your army, you have the option to download all of your data sheets. So that's also helpful. It's less good for referencing your opponent's rules, of course, but it's reasonable for your own. So I agree. I mean, I like Wahapedia. I especially like Wahapedia because of its archive function. So the fact that it archives everything for the last 4 editions is really fucking sick. And I think we would lose a lot because Games Workshop itself does not preserve these documents in any form. We would lose a ton if this got deleted. The issue is all this shit at the bottom. It slows the system down. It's really, is this a WTC thing? Interesting. It's really obnoxious to use. I mean, fucking pop-ups everywhere and shit. So yeah, I do like it. I like it for what it does, but for a quick reference, it's not super helpful for sure. But there are other resources besides just the apps, of course. Hope that Games Workshop makes the leap sooner rather than later. Would be good for the game. Sort of 10th index was great. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, 10th index was like, at least in terms of rules clarity. Well, maybe not clarity, but in terms of rules access, it was certainly the best that we've ever had. Absolutely. And I would fucking love if it went back to that for sure. Oh no, chat. I don't know. It is unfortunate that Games Workshop feels that, and it's like part of the like I don't know. I think that the industry and the like sort of what's the word? The cultural of the industry has changed away from monetizing rules. So rules tends to be like a selling point for the miniatures and the gameplay rather than a sellable product in and of themselves. And it's a very old school mindset to have like to actively monetize your rules. That's really OG stuff. Like that's kind of like it's like the mindset that Games Workshop was founded on, but it was the case in the the 90s and early 2000s. And then you would just like you had everyone and their mom who had like a pet system to play World War II battles that they would monetize and sell on Drive Through RPG or some shit. And everyone, all you did was just buy different rule sets to play with the same miniatures, and that's kind of like where Warhammer came from. So that's sort of, I think, the system that they've been accustomed to, but like the industry elsewhere is very different. And of course, Games Workshop is unwilling to give up that market share. But if you look at literally any other game in the ecosystem, like no one restricts access to their rules as much as Games Workshop does. It's fucking wild. $1 billion company that can't handle a live stream stuck in the past. Yeah, pretty wild, right? Pretty crazy. All right, chat. I have one more interesting on this topic. I have one more interesting place to go. And I didn't really read through this thread very much, but I thought it was very interesting because it does feel like a very natural offshoot of the discussion we were just having. Real 3459 asks, is aggressive upselling common in Games Workshop stores? I'd like to preface this by saying I work in retail. I know upselling just comes with the territory, but this is crazy. I was going to go into my local GW store for the first time to get a few paints for some Space Marines I'm painting, and the manager asked what I was looking for. I said, oh, a few paints. I swear I told them 5 times I was just getting paints, while they were being very pushy and trying to sell me an Armageddon box and all kinds of additional kits. Maybe I'm just overreacting, but this is kind of crazy to me, and it was very off-putting. I'm pretty introverted, so I just kind of wanted to be left alone while I looked for paints. Valid. I don't know if there is any single thing that gets me more uncomfortable than someone actively trying to sell me something. Like, if I haven't expressed my interest in a product or service, then I will not be interested in what you are selling me. I can count on zero figures the number of times I've had somebody actively try to sell me something, and I went to purchase it. Fucking wild. But you can imagine that this would be also off-putting if you were relatively new. And as we were just talking about before, you go up to play, oh, I'm going to go to the Games Workshop and I am going to buy an army. What do I need to play? And they say you need a codex and you need a combat patrol. You need neither of those things. You just need the units that you like. And you need a YouTube subscription. What qualifies as very pushy? Hey, would you like this new box that came out literally this week? I don't know. That feels pushy to me. If I'm like, I'm here to buy Nuln Oil, and they go, with your Nuln Oil, would you like this new box? I would say, no. What makes you think I would want that? Depends on the store. None of the GW stores near me are like this, but I imagine if one store is underperforming, they'll likely push for sales. Tempest Barbarian says, I go to the Manchester one. They always talk to you, but never try to push stuff onto you. It's really, really chill. There are 2 stores near me. One is pretty aggressive, but will back down if you address it. The other's chill. Similar vibe at the Liverpool one. These are all places I have been to before, but not in a million years. Ask what you're doing for. Ask what you're doing. Ask what you're looking for, and give some advice. I don't know. I couldn't read that. Give some advice on modeling and painting. They recently moved from their old location they've been at since 1989. Goddamn. We were talking about very specific stores over here. My local Games Workshop store is really chill. I've never been pushed to buy more than I came in to buy, even if it's just paints or a book. But I do hear some stores are like that. I only have one official store in my area, but my friends from other places mentioned some stores or employees that can be pushy. I have not been. Chat. Elucidate me. Is it? I haven't been to a Games Workshop store in probably. It's like pushing 15 years, I think. Are they still like little tiny baby stores with no room in them? That are like purely basically sales kiosks? Kind of wild. Shocked anyone goes into a GW store to buy anything. LGS is on the way. Yeah, the thing is, like, it's like brand recognition, right? If you're like, oh, I want to buy Warhammer, so I'm going to go to the Warhammer store. Like, they might as well essentially capitalize on your sale if you don't know what, Books and Cards R Us, established in 1994 or whatever. And you don't know that also sells Warhammer because you don't know to look for Games Workshop stores. Like, as if you're someone who has never really experienced the industry at all, that might be a thing that you might not understand. I definitely agree though. Support your local game stores for sure. I went to my local game store recently. Actually, I bought some hyper adapted Raveners. 2 half tables for demos. That's sad. The coolest thing about old GW stores is like how much of a community like hub they were. That's what I remember. Can't find stuff on short notice, especially Votan or Drukari. At Games Workshop stores. That's unfortunate. Yeah, I was surprised actually that my local store is as well stocked as it is. It has it's like half of the store is all GW stuff, and it has like a lot of the kits I like, the kill team kits and stuff that I would not have expected to be very popular. One of you is saying that the local GW store is not well stocked, and one of you is saying that the local GW store is well stocked. I don't know what to believe, chat. Can we find a walkthrough of a Games Workshop store? Warhammer store. If I look through on YouTube for Warhammer stores, what will I find? Here we go. Let's talk. Let's listen. Let's listen to Will Powell.
Well, in the UK, most large towns and cities have a Warhammer store, and they often have a great visual storefront to draw you in. But whilst these locations have an okay stock of only Games Workshop products, they are more set up as introduction centers for beginner hobbyists, focused on getting you into the hobby rather than serving existing customers. And the introductory mindset even goes into how the store is laid out and how the staff act.
The staff are tracked on metrics of how many demo games they give and how many starter sets they sell. This leads to them having a reputation of being quite pushy, feeling like they have scripted talking points instead of having a natural, organic conversation about something that they're really into.
So I guess to answer OP's question, the answer is yes. Thanks, Will Powell on YouTube, for immediately answering the question that we had in this thread. That's very funny. GW store manager explained that you only stock the latest stuff. They move older stuff back to the warehouse. Oh, that's brutal. Jesus. Yeah, that's pretty awkward. I guess it is interesting. I've started to get a lot of things for Games Workshop stuff on eBay, which is hello 39K. Or not eBay, excuse me, on Amazon, which has been a development, of course, in the last couple of years that I didn't expect, but I'm able to get stuff overnighted if it's not at my local game store, which is pretty wild. Interesting. So a lot of people talking about their favorite game stores, which of course is not as helpful. If you order on Warhammer webpage, you get free shipping to the stores. I mean, I guess so, but you can get free shipping to yourself usually if you order literally anywhere else. So that's seems like not a great deal, to be honest. In my experience, GW stores avoid that kind of thing to the point where I've literally been told not to buy something because their main point isn't to push merchandise but recruitment. They know that pushy behavior scares people away. So that's true. So they don't go for the stuff like that. That's interesting. It definitely seems like it's, I guess, kind of based on the individual store itself. Hopefully Warhammer World in DC will be cool. Yeah, for sure. I agree. Be cool to do like a meetup or something out there. Because that's not too far away from me. I would go. But I thought that was an interesting experience to showcase, especially after we talked about some of their products that are most often marketed to new players being basically totally worthless. But we have some just other random stuff we can talk about, which is, I guess, as a bit of a wind down for the live stream, we can talk about a nice little RTT post. We love these kind of stuff from Star Lecino. Looking to get other perspectives here. I'll be writing out what happened at the next RTT I went to, and then some after part, and then some after part. To give context, I started playing Warhammer in October of 2024, and I tend to be a fairly competitive person in anything I do. After a friend got me into Warhammer and moved away, I started playing with random strangers at this one store with an extremely competitive and fairly high-level community. Cool. I had some good mentors as I made mistakes that people were very strict about, measuring above terrain, gaining, losing half an inch as a result, not using exact measurements, being nervous against the best player, so much that I grabbed too many dice one time on an attack, etc., and I got a bad reputation. Interesting. Which I told was resolved after I played my first and only GT with a forced yellow card, only to be exiled from the community about a month or two afterwards. Yikes, dude. I feel like I tend to be extremely competitive, or I tend to be a fairly competitive person in anything I do, conjoined with, I started playing with random strangers and they fucking kicked me out. Does speak a lot about Starlit Chino over here. This one doesn't seem to be quite as cut and dry, maybe, as the last thread that we talked about. I think the OP is leaving out some details. Yeah. Interesting. Fascinating. I took a decent-sized break from Warhammer. I came back to it after several months, wanting to try to be more casual, despite how much brain power and effort goes into anything I do. Listen, guys. I tend to be the best one at anything I do. I commit myself 100%. I started having so much more fun at my most local store, but unfortunately they only play on Wednesdays. Card events are a big thing for them, yeah, for sure. That is good. I do think that approaching the game with a more casual mindset is more fun. And it also allows you to become more competitive. One thing that I have learned in my long career as a miniature tabletop war gamer is that oftentimes what you can find is there are more novel strategies and interesting answers in counterplay in silly off-meta things than there are in playing like the most strictest meta stuff. And so a lot of times if you are like strong with a pet list that has a lot of tools in it, you will typically in fact be more competitive than people who are like meta chasing. And I think the stats go to show that the people who tend like in the A tier of competitive play, not the sort of S tier professional players, if you go down to people who are like, occasional GT winners or whatever, you will find that the people who stick with a single faction and get really good at it and have a good time playing the stuff that they like are way stronger than people who are playing like cutting edge stuff all the time. I did a few RTTs here and there. I won a few of them. Good to know, I guess. Thank you. While still playing most Wednesdays at this local store, I've been asking every single person at the game if they didn't like something I did in-game or socially, and so far, no one has said they had any problems. Yeah, it's a tough question to ask people, and to be fair, being like, yo, do you like me? After a game, they'll be like, yeah, man, you're great. I don't know. Asking someone to their face if they like have any feedback for you as a human being, it feels like, I don't know if you're gonna get unbiased answers, my guy. Incredible. Now to the juice of things. I played an RTT some weeks ago, but I chose to enter as my second faction since I seemed to be much less good at them in comparison to my first faction. That's good. We are diversifying our portfolio a little bit, and I partially wanted to see if I could be good enough with them to win an RTT for once, as I have not before with them. I put up my list early, especially as I had some proxies I need approved by the TO. Always get your TO approval for stand-in models. I 100% concur with that for sure. 5 stores I've been to did not have Sekitar robots. If very funny. That ties in exactly what we were talking about with limited availability of certain units. The next list that was put up looked like it was meant to counter Psychic and Mortals all the way through. This was 20 hours ago. So this was posted today or within the last 24 hours. I wonder how recent this was. The last RTT I went to. Because, like, if you are playing, like, Hex Warp Sekitar cohort, like 3 weeks ago or something, running into someone who counters psychic weapons is not unheard of, because that was just, like, one of the top lists in the meta. That and, like, Scintillating Legion were just really good. And, like, I don't know. It is what it is. So it's like, oh, I think he was teching against my army. Well, yeah, you're playing the best army. What the fuck are you talking about? That's, you know, like I say, I have much less respect, or I guess much less, like, what's the word? I give a lot less leeway to people who are playing, like, meta stuff than I do people who are playing silly fun stuff. Anyway. My first game was against Tao. We'll call my opponent Mike for his post. For this post, excuse me. Mike didn't post. This guy posted. What's his name? Star Licino. Mike brought his son to watch his games. Kind of weird. I imagine the kid's fucking bored out of his mind, but it is what it is. I explained my gotchas. I got an S-tier hero in Genshin Impact. Thoroughly to Mike. Listen. I was gonna, like, I would have pulled out some sort of Genshin Impact or like Zenless Zone Zero or like Honkai Star Rail fucking callback, but I don't know anything about any of those games. So here's my waifu. I will explain her to you now. This is my gotcha. Oops. Mike asked a few questions. I asked a few questions about Mike's gotchas. Tell me about your waifu. Which one is your favorite? Is her move speed the same as mine? Do they jump as high? If his son was Trevi, he'd be able to... No. If I have to sit for 9 hours at an RTT and not play, I'm gonna fucking die. I will kill myself. I would hate that. That would be awful. I get to watch my dad play Warhammer. I don't know, man. I didn't want to take up too much time since we already spent like 20 minutes setting up the layout with the new layout system being based on dispositions. A common criticism of the current system, for sure. So I just asked, he let me know when those certain big units were going to do something or give me a warning. He agreed to. Okay. All right. This was Take and Hold versus Purge. Layout A. Good to know. Thank you. He went first, and I gave him a few warnings about my range and psychic rituals based on his movements. On my turn, I set up Magnus in the little nook of the side flank 2 pieces. I think that's one of those little things where it's like the brick, the 6x4, and then the other thing next to it, and it's on the side, and you can go into the gap. with the psychic hazardous enemy weapons ranged ability, which is wild. I've never seen anyone unironically take that, but fair enough. Magnus has an ability where it's like anyone who targets him within a certain distance gains hazardous on their weapons. Pretty wild. Nobody plays that one. They take -1 damage, or they do extra movement speed. That one basically doesn't exist. Fascinating. I guess it's like if I assume that no one's gonna, the only things that could shoot me are, smart missile systems maybe, then I'll just give the smart missile systems hazardous. So like fair enough, I guess. But otherwise, that's an interesting one. Please warn me about everything. Yeah. Also, yeah, the open-ended thing here is like, please let me know when the big unit is gonna do something. Like, yeah, okay. But if you don't know about it beforehand, then you won't know about it after the fact. So like, what? Excuse me? Fascinating. I remember in the past having wardens in 2 different games in that same spot and being screened out of the side for reinforcements, at least directly. Very different unit, wardens versus Magnus the Red. Wardens are many small 40 mil bases. Magnus the Red is one giant 100 mil base with huge wings that poke out the sides. In his second turn, he ends up getting several units, including the broadsides. A lot of town units look the same to me. These guys were huge compared to others. I think he's talking about Riptides. It sounds to me like he's talking about Riptides, but I actually don't know. Absolutely no idea. To the left of Magnus, 4 inches or so. If they're giant compared to everything, I'm not 100% sure, but it is what it is. He sets up several units, including broadsides, 4 inches out to the left of Magnus. I don't understand how this is happening.
Briong 6931 donated $5 through Super Chat. Wait, Tau famously has no mortal protection besides broadsides, so like, what? That isn't an anti-mortal pick.
So I did grok that comment. And the funny thing is too that like the broadsides are the one thing that does protect against mortal wounds, which is like makes this whole situation very funny. But it doesn't seem like that comment was in relation to this game from when I was asking it. So the next list that was put up looked like it was meant to counter Psychic. Anyway, my first game was against Tau. So this feels like it was an unrelated list. It was like someone submitted, I don't know, what's an anti-psychic list? Like Librarius Conclave with 1,000,000 librarians, which is just a list. It's not even anti-psychic. I guess it would be like if I played Grey Knights and I took nothing but Brotherhood Terminator, like Brotherhood Librarians. Like, haha, now your fucking -1 damage doesn't work on me, and also I don't care about your psychic weapons. Take that. Like that could be, you could maybe say that or something. It doesn't seem to me like the Tau army was one that was anti-psychic. Maybe this comment will have will come back later on, but I don't know. Necrons with spiders. Yeah, I could see it. I mean, Necrosaur Amintar also has an aura of 5+ against mortals and psychic. But on the flip side, Amintar is just in every list. It's not like taking Amintar and Canoptech spiders makes you an anti-psychic list. Those are just generically good units. So I don't know. All right. So this is, I'm already confused about the situation that he's trying to display to me here, right? My opponent sets up a bunch of units, including giant things that are bigger than everyone else. Okay. They're 4 inches off to the left of that Magnus. He's describing protecting himself from reinforcements and his opponent setting up 4 inches away to shoot. You cannot do this. I imagine it means like 4 inches out of the denial area, maybe. So it's like, I don't know. I don't understand. Sisters of Silence. Yeah. I mean, you could play Sisters of Silence as like anti-psychic. You could play Talons with like Sisters of Silence. There's like lists that run like 6 or 7 Sisters of Silence units. And also I think that like Silent Hunters with Rhinos is actually like kind of an interesting build that increases like your general volume in Custodes lists, but I don't know if you like. A lot of people just run them with Lines of the Emperor, and they don't really synergize super well. Specifically, he's counting the gun. Maybe. But even so, the gun on even like a Riptide is like 2 inches maybe from the base. I don't understand how they're 4 inches away from Magnus. Maybe, or he means 4 inches off the table edge. I'm not sure. I made a comment saying I wish he had warned me, but I chalked it up to being my mistake as he's not obligated to do as such. Although I wonder if I'm really being too nice when I warn others of the same thing. I feel like I lost the game, as Magnus is going to die without doing literally anything top of Battle Round 2. I tell him after he's setting up that I'm using the hazardous ability on the broadsides. Not 100% sure if that's the unit's name. Again, it's not that useful on the broadsides because they ignore mortals on a 4+, but okay. Because of what happens later in this section, I doubt it's actually broadsides. I bet it's a Sunforge team or something. Maybe that is what it is. Oh, maybe it's a Sunforge team? He does talk about Melta-Shots with reroll damage. I bet it's like a Farsight Sunforge team, and he uses Shortened Blade to shut them up 6 inches away. I bet that's what's happening right now. That's what I'm gonna that's my headcanon. And he just thinks they're broadsides. Every Town Battles is a broadside, really, when it comes out of it. You can look at your opponent's list. We know that you have it. You can see what the names are. I tell him after he's setting up, I'm using the hazardous ability on the whatever it is. And I ask how many weapons he's shooting. He hands me a token with little scribbles of all their weapons. Also speaks to me that it's some sort of crisis team, because crisis units have a fucking million different guns. He starts shooting and ends up killing me after re-rolling 2 Melta-Shots of 3 into 11. I bet those are Sunforge battlesuits. At this point, I feel mentally shattered. And as his turn continues, I get back into the mode and ask him, yeah, you're like, oh no, Magnus is dead, that's stupid. And then like later on, you're like, oh, sorry, I told you we were doing hazardous. Can we roll the hazardous? He makes them and loses 2 models from that. And then starts whining. He would have never shot the small guns. If my headcanon is correct, those would be gun drones, probably, on the crisis battlesuits, because they get 2 drones, right? They could take a shield and a gun. And then if you have like 3 gun drones, then it's 3 more hazard checks you roll, and you fail on a 1 or a 2 and take 3 wounds. So 2 failed hazard checks kills a regular crisis battlesuit. So if we're rolling 2 Meltas plus 1 gun drone for each model, on average, we lose like 1.5. We roll a little bit below average. Oh no, plus a character probably. So we probably lose 2 battlesuits on average. I bet that's exactly what happened. I bet a Sunforge battlesuit team did close deep strike and Melta-Shotted fucking Magnus and blew him up. I bet that's what happened. He starts whining he would have never shot the small guns since I was dead before that, and I never officially declared it in his shooting phase. I make a comment that Magnus died without doing anything. He just says whatever and moves on. Also, not how targeting works, my guy. You declare all your guns at the start, and then you roll hazardous regardless of whether or not you attack with them. You have to actively declare not to shoot those guns. If you say everything into Magnus, then the expectation is that you have fired all of your gun drones and stuff too. Feels like both players are at fault for not listening. Yeah, I don't know. I put the focus cap on, and when I'm under pressure and focus on scoring, later in my turn, I get off a rhino with 5 Flimmer Rubrics and Exalted on Disc Sorcerer. I Temporal Surge up, and I'm only able to touch a train piece to see over it with an Aspiring Sorcerer, a Soul Reaper Rubric Marine, and 2 Flamers to shoot at some Toughness 6 models. I say that those models are going to shoot at those 6 Toughness guys, and the rest are shooting at the Kroot on the edge of the crater train piece, since that's all they can see. Once I get done shooting with the 4 models I can see over the train, and then go to my Exalted, he says, what's shooting now? And I say it's the same unit, going into the Kroot with the other models. He says, I can't shoot them because I didn't declare them specifically, as if the rest did not count. He said, because I held him to the rules of the hazardous chest, he's going to hold me to this one. Oh boy, chat. I don't think I would have had enough attacks to kill the Kroot anyway. I just wanted to maximize damage I could do, so I just accepted it and said whatever. Fucking 3 Flamer Rubrics into a Kroot squad is like 80% chance to kill them. I don't know, man. It's not quite that good. It's probably at 40 or something, but it's unironically dangerous to that unit. Because they don't save, right? They just die if you convert the 3 into the reroll. I don't know. I would have stick to my guns to that one. Be like, why wouldn't I declare them? Let's say I didn't declare them as a shooting target. In what possible universe would I have declared no target with the flamers? Get fucked, dude. We're low on time, so the TO asked me to finish my turn 3 and then call the game. You got to turn 3. It is 11th edition, in fairness. 11th edition does feel like it plays very slowly. And call it there and put in the scores. Mike comes over to my side and he says he wins the game. And I'm like, I get secure no man's land for big on these objectives. He's not listening, and his kid is in my face on the other side. I let him have the win because I didn't really want to argue over these points, instead of, especially in front of his kids. This is like, I mean, when you go into a game, just like before we get to the conclusion here, here, my immediate thoughts here. It's like when you go into a game and you tell your opponent, I don't know what your models are and I don't know what they do. Tell me when they do anything. And then you get salty that your opponent does something you didn't expect. And then your opponent gets salty for the same reason. Like we've come out of the gate with a failure of communication. And I feel like we maybe need to take it back a notch. Just be like, why do we not know what any of our guys do? It's not that necessarily you didn't tell me. It's that I also didn't ask, basically. So it's like, I don't know. I will hold you to the rules I myself do not understand, and thus I will just interpret them and expect you to follow that interpretation. That's true. Also played at stores where they're only open for 3 hours. This is a tournament though. It's a tournament game, so it's timed. And so like they have the TO come and tell them to finish the game. Like it is problematic if they don't finish in time, of course. But both Thousand Suns and Tau can be very time intensive. So I think it's not unreasonable not to finish, but I do think, it does speak that the game was going for a little bit long for sure. Chess clock. Yeah, maybe. Always explain what our stuff does before the game. Yeah. Or at least, ask your opponent. I love fucking telling people what all my stupid bullshit is, because I think it's fun. So if I'm like, do you know what my stuff does? And they go, yes. I go, okay. But if they go, no, I'll be like, well, let me just give you, I'll just tell you what to expect. These guys are going to fucking kill you, and these guys are going to fucking kill those guys, and these guys are going to reactive move. Cool? Cool. Just moving on, I don't know. You're shooting yourself in the foot. And I think I have more thoughts about that, but we can finish the story here in a sec. The game in interaction with Mike put a sour taste in my mouth, but I played my other 2 games with no issues and won those games. Mike is still playing his 3rd game at the end, running low on time. He's practically tabled his opponent, but is behind on score. I'm watching since I have nothing else to do. The TO tells him to wrap it up, and Mike tells his opponent they can talk it out because he always talks it out. Well, his opponent says he never talks it out because it's stuff that hasn't actually happened yet. Dang. Normally I wouldn't get involved, but I was still pretty annoyed with Mike. Yeah, get wrecked, Mike. And the hypocrisy in that moment. So I said he didn't do that in our game, and he replies to admitting he cheated, since I would have won if we had talked it out, then accepts and implies we'll talk later. He loses the game but wins the RTT. Oh, it was a pair down? Must have been a very small event. He did not find me to talk about it, but I didn't want to talk to him anyway. Wait, what? He admits that he cheated. Well, I guess not cheating, but he admits that he went on table, I guess, right? So curious on everyone's perspective. This is just wild. I'm sure we also may not have set up terrain perfectly, allowing reinforcements to blast Magnus. That's also my responsibility. I signed up for the same RT. Also, Magnus is fucking massive. I don't know. That's it's such a true line of sight issue. Is is Magnus's wing too big, or is he able to angle in a way that he doesn't protrude over the terrain features or whatever? I don't know exactly. That's hard to adjudicate without seeing the actual table. I signed up for the same repeating RTT this month, and I see Mike is on the roster. I'm intending on bringing Custodes and not bringing any form of casual, nor will I put my list in early. This is primarily out of anger directed towards Mike. Dude, you gotta calm down, my guy. You gotta calm it down, bro. We can't go in if all you do is go in with like this sourpuss attitude. Every time you go play at the store, it's gonna be stressful, and you're just gonna get mad and upset and burn out. You gotta just accept it, my guy, and take a chill pill. That is the other set of perspective of life for people. What am I doing wrong? That sort of thing. The store is really great. And I really like the owner and employees. Interesting. I don't know. It feels like there's probably some sort of mindset issue. This is the supervision of a villain origin story. So here's a little bit of my thing, chat. So, like, I do feel... So this guy, I think that the beginning of this whole situation is that this guy's salty that he didn't know his opponent could shoot Magnus. I think it's because, like I said before, I don't know if this is the case because it's very difficult to parse like exactly what the board state was. This feels like it's because he didn't know his opponent could close deep strike. That's sort of how I feel. This situation arose. And he's playing against like Red Kadra, and he's like, hey, I don't know what any of your stuff does. Just tell me when it does anything, which is like too late to plan for any game action. And then he kind of like gets upset that he doesn't know his opponent can do that. I don't know if that's 100% the case, but that's what it certainly sounds like to me. And I do feel, and I've talked about this a couple times over the last week or so, but I do feel like there is a little bit of this like mentality in the community where it's like, if I don't know something, it's my opponent's fault. And it does feel like this interaction is a little bit of that energy. And while I do think it is, of course, an open information game, you are not only encouraged, but obligated to inform your opponent of anything that they ask about. In addition, in order to not create situations like this, where you and your opponent both have a fucking shitty time and you never want to talk to each other again and you're mad, which just sucks and it makes you not want to play the game anymore, then you should go out of your way to inform your opponent about things, right? I don't think that there's like, you're just hamstringing yourself and everyone. You might get a W on the table, but then like lose in life, basically, if you like let your opponent walk into a bunch of gotchas and all this bullshit. So like, I don't think that's the case. But if your opponent does nothing and makes no effort to prevent you from taking a legal game action, and then complains that they didn't know you could take that legal game action, that is in fact not your fault. And like, coming into the game with like, oh, you know, I don't know what any of your stuff does or whatever, doesn't put it on your opponent to explain that, right? Like, you do need to be actively seeking information about the board state. Like, you need to pre-measure your opponent's threat ranges. You need to pre-measure their ability to reserve. You can be like, hey, can you close reserve? How far can this guy move? Could he draw a line of sight if I go here? It is contingent on you to do that. And while I don't think that anyone wins if your opponent capitalizes on you like not doing that, in a way that's, you know, that's like poor sportsmanship, I do think that it's not their fault if you don't, right? So that's already like a tough situation. You know what I'm saying? Just by know the vague rules for sure. Magnus would have lived if he took -1 damage. Also, almost certainly. Right? If it's like, hey, I hit you with like five meltaguns and 1 plasma gun, and it was like, well, if I had checks notes 4 damage back, I would have lived. Yeah. First off, don't use the hazardous thing. What's that? Although, like I said, if you're only expected to take damage from 1 damage, hits from 1 damage indirect fire, it does make sense, right? If you don't think your opponent can shoot you. But that's why you have to clarify with your opponent. Hey, if I put Magnus here, here's my line of sight to the edge. Can you get there? And if your opponent goes, yeah, I can 6-inch deep strike, you go, sick. If your opponent goes, no, and then 6-inch deep strikes, they've misrepresented the board state to you. I don't know, man. Call a judge. Like, that's immediate cheating. But like, if you don't ask any of the questions, what are they supposed to do? So that's already weird. I don't know. The hazardous thing is just an effect that occurs. His opponent can't complain about that. Like, oh, you didn't say it, and so I shouldn't take them. No. It's just a thing that happens. This isn't like, I'm assuming I'm like remembering the rule correctly, right? It's just like a unit that targets Magnus gets hazardous, right? We'll go to 39k because I can't be bothered to open my app right now. It's in his Unearthly Power ability. It's treats each start of the opponent's shooting phase. Select one enemy unit. Okay. I see. So that comes down to whether or not his opponent understood when the timing of that occurred, I guess. I tell him after he's setting up that I'm going to use the hazardous ability on the broadsides. So that effect is like even worse than I thought it was. I thought it was like your weapons gain hazardous, but no. It's one unit gains hazardous if they shoot him. Fucking okay. So I tell him after he's setting up, I'm using the hazardous abilities on the broadsides. So also, if you don't know what they're called, if you go, I'm gonna point this at the broadsides, and your opponent goes, okay, it like looks at a broadside on the other side of the table. It's like I don't know what that's gonna do, but sure. And then shoots his crisis team, and then his crisis team, you tell your opponent his crisis team has to take hazardous rolls, and he's like, why? Wait, what? You said it was on the broadsides, but it's because you never asked what the names of your opponent's units were, and you didn't look them up in their list even after it when writing this like 2-page article on Reddit. I don't know, man. It does feel more and more like your opponent is probably fine. Still run into people that don't understand what Death Strike Terminators do that have played all 10th edition of GTs. That is weird. Well, it's also like, there's a difference between not knowing what a unit does when you get to the table, right? And then like not gaining that knowledge as you play, right? There's like, you get to the table and you're like, oh, Terminator guys. What do those guys do? And you go, they 6-inch deep strike. You're like, pretty good. That's cool. But if you go like, Terminator guys, neat. And your opponent goes, do you know what they do? And you're like, no, but that's fine. You're like, what? Now you can complain if you don't act with that information in mind. And then later you go, oh, I didn't know they could 6-inch deep strike. Okay. But they do. And I have to assume that you know if you don't ask me. Like, I don't know, chat. Knowledge of the game in armies is a skill. I do agree with that. And I do think that it's a skill. It's a skill that's like particularly it's like very laborious to learn, right? It's like knowing all the things. And I think that the community is benefited by the attitude that perfect knowledge is not required at all times. I think that's fine. However, I do think that at the table, because you and your opponent are obligated to inform each other of rules, it is your responsibility to know those rules when your opponent makes them available. And if you don't, then I don't think anyone can help you. So, like, I do think that the attitude of the community that we should help each other through the very complicated game of Warhammer 40,000 is positive and good. It makes the game more fun to play for everyone, and it encourages more people into the community. I think that's great and amazing also. However, your opponent is never responsible for your ignorance. All of those rules are available to you. You can ask them questions. If you don't do that, and also you don't know, then what are they supposed to do about it? And I do think that there's this like belief within the community that if you aren't contributing 100% knowledge to your opponent at all times, then any gameplay mistake that they make is your fault. And I push back very heavily on that. I don't think that's the case, right? If you make a mistake based on imperfect knowledge that you did nothing to attain, then it's not your opponent's fault for not coaching you. Like, however, if your opponent tells you at the start of the game, or they tell you when you're moving, or they tell you when you ask, oh, this guy's a reactive move, or these guys are really, they intervene for free, or these guys, like, watch out for my 6-inch thing over here. It's like a weird aura I have. Then you have to operate with that knowledge. But, like, if you're just wandering up to your opponent and then they're using abilities on you and you're like, what? I didn't know any of those abilities. And, like, what the fuck are they supposed to do, dude? Like, I don't know. The worst is when also, and the part where I get, like, I think push a little harder is when somebody doesn't have knowledge of their own army. That's where like, if you don't know what my army does, I will do my best to assist you. But if you don't know what your own army does, that should be baseline. You should know all your rules before you show up to an event, you know, like, real talk. And if you're like, oh, I thought I could use this stratagem here, and you're like, no, that stratagem's only used in the shooting phase, and they'll be like, well, I would have done everything differently. And you're like, well, I don't know, man. Like, you brought these guys. So I don't know. It's like, it's such a slippery slope, and it's very difficult to elucidate the, like, it's very difficult to sort of enunciate the way that I think, I guess, like, the level of responsibility that either player has to their opponent, like the other player's knowledge, without sort of sounding like this hardliner, this, like, you know, gotcha, like, sort of try hard player, which of course I don't believe in. And it's like, I think that the rule, you know, like the letter of the law, like, probably should be that, like, once you make a play, you should have to, you know, stand by it, whatever, regardless of new information. But the spirit of the law should be that, like, there should be active communication between both players in order to elucidate what's going to happen if you do a particular, like, if you, like, go down a particular line of play. But that's, like, very difficult to codify into an actual rule, you know what I mean? I don't know if that's it makes any sense, Chance. You should have told me why Terminators can deep strike. How come you didn't tell me? Why didn't you tell me that? Personally, don't want to win just because a guy forgot something. But I'm also not sitting there reminding people nonstop. Yeah, like I said before, the game's useless to both players if, like, you like, mess up and then you forget a thing, and then it's, you know, it is what it is. If you're like, oh, I forgot that guy reactive moved, and now I'm going to walk into this thing, and now you're going to, like, fuck me, then the game's, like, not, you know, what are we doing here, right? We did have a game on stream that, like, felt kind of bad, that from Lone Star Open, and I don't think this was necessarily, like, a case of either player, you know, misrepresenting anything to their opponent, but, like, one player walked within 6 inches of a unit, and the unit heroically intervened at the end of the turn, and it basically ended the game. That was GG. I feel that if I were in that position, I would have been like, oh, don't forget to stay outside 6 inches of my guy because I'm going to intervene you. And that would be like, okay, cool. And then we would, like, play the whole game out. And honestly, in the way the board state was at the time, I think the player who intervened would still win. Like, to be perfectly honest, I don't think they needed that intervention. And the other player was like, oh yeah, I am within 6, so, like, I guess intervene me. But it was like, I don't know. It definitely made the game feel less helpful, right, to both players. And in a competition, however, like, we are at a super major, which means that I think that you should have the capacity to stand by your plays, right? So on one hand, I might not have done that personally, but the player who got intervened into has to accept that as the board state. That's what's happening. And they have to live with that, you know, that decision. And if there isn't a time to hold somebody by their plays, or if there is a time to hold somebody by their plays, it would be in a super major, right? A 300 player event where you're both undefeated. If there was a time to, like, you know, put our practice into play, it would be now. And he, like, messed up by a little bit and got intervened, and it was bad. On the flip side, in basically any other instance, if this game was for, like, learning purposes, or we were doing it at RTT or something, and the goal was to absorb data, I think that it would feel bad if I were the player doing the intervening, because I would feel like I got a win for free and I didn't really deserve. And I didn't really get to play out the full extent of my army and put my like skills to the game to the test, because I basically got given this like huge out that just let me got the massive bonus in the game. This is a tangent. I don't really know where I'm going with this, chat. At least Warhammer's not being sold to Saudi Arabia. Thank you, chat, for sure. Trevi's my Nova experience with reactive moves. Oh my god, every fucking game. I'll be like, I'll deep strike here. They're like, I'll react. I'm like, brother, I just deep struck. It's not a move. It's not a move. It's not a normal move. You only move on normal moves. I appeared from a warp portal. How is that anything but an abnormal move? Yeah, that was very funny for sure. Don't know how many people can just take mistakes as a learning opportunity. Get my stuff killed all the time, put stuff out of position. That's on me. I don't want to take back. Yeah, to some extent, if there's like, if I just like forget something, I feel really bad like asking for takebacks. I often feel that the experience of asking for and or being offered a takeback is worse than just the result of the action. So I'm like, oh, I just don't want to be in that situation. So I will actively go out of my way to like not try to, I will learn a lot more by taking a take back and then like rewinding the situation, because I'll fucking burn into my brain that I shouldn't need to be in that situation in the future. I had a really bad one in 10th edition where I only realized it after the fact, but like this is an example of like where I remember it so much. And I was like, I think I was playing around Mists of Deimos against Grey Knights, and I had concocted this plan where I could take an objective by temporal surging a unit. I could like up down with an unprolific crystal and then kill a unit with a doom bolt to then get myself into range to temporal surge and then ignore Mists of Deimos, because temporal surge is in the shooting phase. You can only Mists of Deimos in the movement phase. I do the whole thing and I temporal surge and my opponent Mists of Deimos, and I was like, why did I let him do that? And I was like, I thought I had a solution for this. But I was like so far deep into my shooting phase at that point. I was like, huh, okay. And then I moved on. And I was like, well, that sucks. I walked into a Mists of Deimos. And then like an hour later, I was like, motherfucker. The reason I was doing this whole convoluted play was to ignore Mists of Deimos, and he triggered it anyway. And I didn't catch him. And I was like, I almost went back and was like, brother, I think I lost the game because of that. And I was like, can we reverse this game state? Because like, I feel like I want to change things at the end there, and like that situation is so fucking awkward that I remember it like 3 years later. Whereas if I like have a situation where I like, oh oops, I walked into an awkward like an Overwatch or something and then my unit died, I'll be like, oh well, fair enough, I guess. But if I walk into this like weird situation where I want to rewind the game state, it's like so we like I don't know, it feels so strange to me. Casual play versus tournament play is very different. Yeah, I don't disagree. I do think like I do often consider, and this very often comes up when, especially with like live stream coverage, because 99% of the games of Warhammer 40k that I experience are in like pretty high stakes competitive environments, right? They're like at GTs and majors and super majors, and they are, for most people, for 99% of the community, they are the upper echelon of competitive play. Or like T5S2 pod finals, right? Which like most people don't get to. Only whatever it is, like 6-7% of the people in the event will even get to a pod finals, or 14% of the people in the event will get to the pod finals. And of the people in the totality of the community, most people don't get to that level, right? And that's not like, that's just the finals game for an ITT. And so like, there's a lot of discourse especially from people who watch coverage, where you're like, well, we should always be open to take backs and stuff like that. And to some extent, I do agree. And I do think that Warhammer becomes kind of like becomes a dysfunctional game if you hold people to the letter of their movement at all times, because it's too many models and it doesn't work like that. If Warhammer was like was a skirmish game that had like 2D measurement and was like fucking Crisis Protocol or some shit, then you could play it, I think, to a much stricter degree. But it's too many models and too many abilities and too many things that are overarching at all at one time. You can't be like, oh, that guy's not 7.97 inches away from me, so I'm going to trigger my reactive move. No takesy backsies. Because like it just makes the game shitty and nobody has a good time. However, if there was a level to which you would be more strict on people than you would at your local tournament or your local game store or your RTT or whatever, it would be the level of 40K that typically exists in coverage, right? It would be the GT and the major and the super major level event. And so like a lot of times you do get this narrative where people are like, how come nobody ever, how come that guy lets somebody get a reactive move or something and didn't offer take back or whatever? And you're like, well, you're in the finals of like fucking LVO or something, like you are expected to play to a higher level, a higher standard. And you do, it does open the question that if you were ever gonna enforce the board state as it exists, where would that be? And it would probably be the level at which you are top table at like a super major. So like if we are playing the smaller events to learn, the places that we should apply the learning is at the larger events. So it stands to reason that you should be held to a higher standard there, especially if you're near top table, especially if you're undefeated or you're playing for, finals or top cut or whatever. But at the end of the day, I also think it's totally contingent on it's up to the discretion of the opponent as well. And some people want the game to be more cut and dry, and some people want the game to be more loosey-goosey, and an understanding between two players, I think, is very valid.
Adriong 6931 donated $2 through Super Chat. Cover the 40K show news. Mike Flanagan to write.
We can talk about that for a sec. Yeah, Henry Cavill released a statement, I guess, on his Facebook. I saw the post the other day confirming that he does, in fact, see if we can find the actual post. Here we go. Oh, it's on his Instagram, excuse me. Those are the same thing. Who cares? Confirming that they do, in fact, have a Warhammer cinematic universe in the works. I think I'm a little bit trepidatious because I do think that saying we are going to make a Warhammer cinematic universe immediately dooms it to failure. Because every time anyone comes in from like to an industry and says we're gonna make a WCU, it immediately dies. So coming in with that mentality, I think is a little bit problematic for sure. But yeah. Also, they talked about the guy who's writing it, but I don't know who that is, so I don't know who writers are. Who the fuck is Mike Flanagan? Here's an article about the guy. He looks like that. And he did some Netflix stuff. Neat. Jesus Christ. Games Workshop made almost $300 million this year. Fuck me. That's profit. That's not revenue. That's profit. Fuck off. That's insane. So anyway, I guess that guy's doing the writing. So that's cool. Neat. I dig Midnight Mass. What is that? Is this the one with the vampire? Midnight. Is this the one with the vampire with Raoul Coley? It is. Another Warhammer face, by the way. Do you guys know Raul Coley is really big into Warhammer? Thought that was pretty neat. He hosted Warhammer Skulls for like 2 years. Pretty cool. I did watch the show. I thought it was cool. I did like it. Can't teach me to read. That's true. I don't know how to read. Some good questions in chat, I think, which are going to be a good way to sort of ramp up the show. Does playing by intent solve the situation? I'm going to put Magnus over here to screen out the corner. Are we good? Yes. I think that's very reasonable. Like I was saying before, like you have to be proactive in advocating for yourself in a game of Warhammer. You have to say, here's what you do. And I'm like, I envisioned this in my head so clearly. And the fact, and I think maybe it's like a culture thing that we don't get there. I think to some extent it might be the fact that the like OP in this case like considers himself like to be an extremely competitive person, so doesn't like feel that this is necessary or something. But you just go, you move Magnus into the spot, and you take your tape measure, you take your line measurement tool or whatever, and you say, here's my line of sight to the edge. If you bring your reserves in, can you see me? And you're like, here's the line of sight. And then your opponent goes, yes. And you go, okay, well, I won't put Magnus there then. Or your opponent goes, no. And then you're like, cool. And then if your opponent goes, wait, I can shoot you. Well, then you're like, well, now we have a problem. And now I'm going to need to redo my movement because you have literally given me false information about the board state. And it's like, you can look at the miniature. Like there's to some level, like there's like the core mechanics of Warhammer 40,000. Don't change that much. So you look at the miniature and you're like, if you bring this guy out of the strat reserve and he has a gun that overhangs 2 inches or whatever, and here's the line, and we'll give it a little bit of leeway for the 2-inch overhang. Does it look like that guy can fit there and shoot me? And then your opponent like grabs the model and proxies it and goes yes or no, and then you're done. Or the other thing is you just like look over and you measure your line to the edge and you go like, hey, can you shoot me with anything here from here? Can you bring in reserves, or like can you like that guy move really far to shoot me? And their opponent goes like either yes or no, right? And then the whole situation's resolved. If they go yes, then you put Magnus somewhere else. If you go no, then there becomes an issue of information transfer if their opponent then acts on a rule that they didn't previously disclose to you, right? At that point, it does become a problem, an issue with the opponent. If you ask them explicitly a question and they do not give you the answer, that's wrong, and they will probably get yellow carded. So like, I don't know necessarily if it's like if it has to be an intentional thing, right? Because intentional play does require some level of showcase to your opponent. But I think just like open communication between the player and the opponent would absolutely clear up this situation. This whole post would be gone. And I do think there is, especially people who come in with this mindset where it's like if you have a history of playing other games, like playing Magic the Gathering, for example, or like chess, where active communication with your opponent is not only frowned upon, but in many cases actively discouraged. And then you come to Warhammer, which is a game that is only functional, only possible because you have open communication with your opponent. And they assume that because they're a competitive player in a different arena, that they will be similarly successful in Warhammer without that level of communication. Then issues like this arise. And I would hazard a guess. I would put money on the fact that that's what's happening here. This person goes, I'm competitive. I've won RTCs before. I know what I'm doing. And so I can play like I do in other games where I just make moves and then pass to my opponent, basically. And then when your opponent does things because you never disclose, you never discuss with them what was possible, And when they do things based on the board state, then you get upset with them. But you didn't fucking confirm anything with them. You didn't talk to them at all. And then you get mad, and then because you get mad, they get mad, and then everyone's mad, and no one's talking, and then you get the situation that happens at the end where the opponent's like, I want to get out of here, and I just want to beat this guy because he's being annoying. And then you take the L, and you feel sour about it, and then you go to the next RTT with fucking spite towards him. So I think that's probably my final point, is that, like, I think the whole question of assigning blame to rules knowledge is maybe not even the question we should be asking. Like I said earlier, I have like a very tough time enunciating like my philosophy on this, because I feel very strongly about like very specific situations, but it almost feels like it's like something that isn't like can't be codified into an explicit rule. And I think it should just be that like you got to talk with your opponent about stuff. If you and your opponent have open communication throughout the entire game, none of this shit ever happens ever. I don't know. Does that make sense? I do think definitely to the point that Behemoth is making. I have a rule on playing by intent. Can I grab it? I have a rule on a video on playing by intent that I think establishes some like very sort of baseline rules for how it should be treated. And this is very much how I see playing by intent in competitive play. Here you go. Boop. I put it in the chat. And basically, the spark notes are that you must be able to demonstrate what you're doing is possible, and you must be able to demonstrate that what you're doing, and you must be able, like, your opponent must be able to agree on that, right? So like playing by intent can shorthand a lot of action, but it cannot create otherwise impossible action. So if you go, I'm going to screen out this corner and I have 10 guys and they're going to be all up in a ball, but like if there's a little spot, I'll move them around or whatever. And then your opponent goes, cool. Otherwise we'd spend 30 seconds carefully measuring out every single angle where anything could go and making sure there's a guy there. That's like very reasonable playing by intent. Or like, I'm going to run my guys at you. My intent is to stay outside your reactive move range. And I'm going to be like 8-ish inches away. But like if one guy gets within 7.8 inches, we're going to both understand that I was supposed to be outside of 8. Understood. Fair enough. But if you go, my intent is to screen out this drop with Magnus the Red so that he can't be shot. And your opponent goes like, well, he's one guy and he's fucking massive and there's a tiny building in front of him. I can probably see him, right? Then that you cannot assign that to intent. So like you have to do the thing we were talking about earlier. You just grab the little line measurement tool and you go, here's my line to Magnus. Can anything get over there to shoot him? I don't want to be shot. Let me know. And if your opponent goes yes, then you're fine. But you can't just like declare that you want a particular board state to be the case without it being, if it's not possible. Dudex, if you ask, are you done with movement? And he says yes, and then you say, rapid ingress, and then you ask for a take back so you can screen. Is that okay? I mean, it's kind of like up to you. I think that in general, it would be okay. What's pretty reasonable is that like, I love what Enba had this line. I fucking love this. He had this great line in a T5S2 invitational game earlier where he goes, you go to the end of your opponent's movement and you don't say, are you done with movement? You say, are you satisfied with your screening? I love that. That's so good. I don't think it's unreasonable for somebody to be like, oh, I forgot a spot in my deployment zone. Do you mind if I fix it? And you go like, yeah, that's fine. It was likely that both players could have read that you were going to rapid ingress regardless. It might have been that he forgot. And I think it's like, it's up to you whether or not you want to let him go back and fix that. I think it's not unreasonable for him to fix it. Again, especially if you're playing a casual game, it's more informative for you to play against somebody who's screening well than to play against somebody who fucks up and gives you like a bunch of charges out of nowhere. So I think it's like, it depends on a moment to moment basis, but I do love the line, are you satisfied with your screening, right? Or are you satisfied with your positioning? Because then it does give it to you, like it puts the ball in the opponent's court, right? Something's about to happen. Can you fix it? Or can you solve it? Or are you okay with it happening anyway? Oh no, chat. I apologize. My monitor has died. Which is problematic actually, because I can't interact with the stream. All right, one sec, chat. Sorry. I can't control any of my equipment from here now. So I reboot it. This monitor is like secondhand. It's really shitty. So occasionally it disconnects and it needs to get restarted. Bomba Fett. Do you need to buy a codex if you want to play it in LGS? No. You do not need to buy a codex to play Warhammer 40,000, the miniature game. You can reference your rules elsewhere, and if you would rather spend the money on more miniatures, you should be able to do that. Sometimes I forget to move a unit, and if a friend of mine basically always asks, is it intentional that you didn't move this unit, or do you want me to shoot it? Yeah, I think that's like very reasonable too. Like I said, it's like open communication, right? The game's better when you and your opponent are talking. And if you're like, those guys are just still like hanging out there. Did you want that? And you're like, no. Can I move them? And you're like, yeah, it's okay. Did I get an Armageddon box? I did. It's right here. Look. That one. Anyway, chat, I think we're sort of losing steam. So I think that we are probably going to go ahead and wrap up. But yeah, interesting conversation. I think that there's so much nuance to this whole kind of discussion about rules, like the onus of rules knowledge. I don't think I'm very good at elucidating it, to be honest. Definitely, like, some of my content recently is sort of described to me that I'm not super good at it. I definitely think that there's like a line you have to tread. I do think that some people in the community want like this sort of format where their opponent kind of just like explains to them everything that's happening all the time. And I don't think that that's necessarily a level of responsibility that you have to give. That like you're requiring a level of responsibility of the other player that I don't think is necessarily fair. But also, I don't think the game's good or fun if you're just like fucking gotching your opponent all over the place, or like doing things that they didn't know you could do because you didn't talk about it beforehand. So, I don't know. I think that it's a whole spectrum. We can do 3 World Eaters, 1 DP over 1,000 Suns. The army is fucking sick. I will play the fuck out of that army. I'm sorry I haven't played many stream games, but the travel to Texas has eaten a lot of my time. So I'm going to maybe this weekend if I ended up having time. But I have games scheduled. I have 2 games scheduled on Friday, and I have another game scheduled tomorrow. And I have to leave for some other stuff later this evening, so I can't play today, unfortunately. Plus, I'm like, because of LSO, I'm behind on all my normal content, so sucks. There's a very fine line between telling your opponent your reactions and flooding them with information. Yeah, I think that's fair. For sure. And I also haven't played Halo. Yeah. I'm like, I really want to, and I'm like, where the fuck is the time? Where is it? I can't find it. I very rarely find time for single player games, and unfortunately, there's so many games that I would like to play, and I don't know how anyone has time for single player campaign games. To be perfectly honest, chat, it blows my mind. I don't know, but that's just me being busy, I think. Yeah, and I also think too, Saijan, to your point, there is also a case where in some cases you do like weaponize open information. Where people literally do this. They'll be like, watch out for my reactive move. I have one here and here, and this guy can also use one. And now your opponent's playing against all of them. And he's like, oh, and this guy has one flamer. So if I overwatch, it might be that guy. And during your opponent's turn, you're like giving them so many pieces of info. That is like, you can do that, but to some extent, some people might call that unsportsmanlike. They might call that as like a conduct issue, because you are basically just interrupting their flow state with basically like verbal garbage, and reminding them of a bunch of things that in many cases won't matter, which is like, that's the other end of the spectrum, right? If you can be blamed for your opponent not knowing all the things you can do, then you're incentivized to constantly be telling them all the things you can do, which of course then incentivizes this kind of like angle shoot where you're just like, all you're doing is telling your opponent things you can do. Yeah. So I don't know, chat. It's 4-player co-op. I have a problem, which is that none of the people I play video games with like playing the games that I like to play. So I recently played Angels Fall First, which I very much love, which is a game that is vastly improved by team play. Man, I have a tough time finding people to play with, unfortunately. And I love this game because it speaks to me. This is an off topic. This isn't Warhammer related. If you want to fuck off on the non-Warhammer stuff, this would be the time to do it. Ryan's got me on a spiral. But it's like, it speaks to me on like a personal level, because it's like this little team of developers who were like, basically, I don't think we got very much money to make this game, and we're working on it for way too long. It was like a really good idea, but they probably like didn't get funding or whatever, and they just did it in their free time or with like little drips and drabs of resources that they got. And it's basically like a Battlefront 2, like Star Wars Battlefront 2, like 2005 Redux, with just like dramatically better mechanics. And it's really fun. There's definitely there's some stuff you could add, I think, to improve it, but it's like very much like old school Battlefront or like Battlefield vibes, and I love it very much, but nobody wants to play it with me, which makes me very sad. And the same thing would happen if I tried to play Halo with anyone. So it is what it is. I did play PlanetSide 2 for like 15 minutes. I think the promise of that game, I never like PlanetSide 1 was before my time, but PlanetSide 2 was very much I think I was a little bit after the rush, and so it had been like all heavily monetized, and the promise of the game was like much greater than the reward. Like Battlefield could only ever survive with massive maps if the maps were populated, and then suddenly like it wasn't like 15 minutes before like points of conflict, right? Before like points of friction with the other team. And PlanetSide 2 had the issue that were like most zones you would go into were like one person running around. And you could like shoot them with a sniper rifle, and then they would respawn and shoot you with a sniper rifle, and you were like, cool. All right. Well, this is fun. So I think I got into it after the period of popularity. So it was very much like not very well. It didn't have a very high player base at the time. Can't stand when someone's a motor mouth the entire game. I understand with that. Yeah, for sure. I definitely, yeah, I can vibe with that. I also I don't like it when people tell me what I'm going to do. That's like, if you want to talk to me about all your shit, for the most part, I do pride myself in generally like playing around reactive play pretty well. I think if I'm typically very bad at doing all the other parts of Warhammer 40K, but I think that like if you have reactive play, I'm generally pretty good about it. And so if you're constantly reminding me of all your reactive moves, I'll just like be like, fucking do it, dude. I don't give a shit. What are you gonna do? Reactive move to this and then let me charge you over here? What the fuck? You're not gonna do that. You're just telling me to tell me. But if somebody goes, here's what you're going to do this turn, I'm like, fuck off. You don't know what I'm going to do. I'm a wild card, baby. That is where people, like some people are like, oh, like this unit will go here and then they average this. And then so they should deal this amount of damage. And then this will happen. And then this and this and this will happen. And I'm like, you don't know that, bro. You're setting yourself up for failure if you are enunciating at the start of my turn what I'm going to do and the expected result. Because this is Warhammer 40k, I'll give you a hint. There is no expected result. Embrace the chaos, baby. If you can't play around weird fucking shit happening, you lose. For sure. Rip Shy Guy? Need somebody to co-op? I mean, maybe. Yeah, dude. And we do have a video game channel in the Tactical Tortoise server. So that might be the case. Mitchell. Yeah, it was good to talk to you at LSO. No problem with all the information. Glad to share the stuff that was like painstakingly, the knowledge I painstakingly accrued via trial and error over like 2 years. Definitely, I don't know that much, but I'm getting there. If a guy enunciates what I'm going to do, I'll just cheat. Didn't see that coming. You definitely didn't expect me to just move in a more than you expected because I doubled my own movement characteristic. Correct. Incredible. All right, chat. I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up. We're just kind of waffling at this point. Thanks, everyone, for hanging out with me. I'm going to be live on Twitch tomorrow at the same time. We are playing against Astrobilitarum. It's the Stormlord build. We're going to see if hyper-adapted Raveners can kill a Stormlord. Who knows? We'll find out. I am anti-vehicle 5+, so let's go. Also, we have 2 games scheduled on Friday. We have a game scheduled at 1 p.m. That's a T5S2 Pod Finals game that will be on this channel. And I should have another game that I have to schedule because I scheduled that game at the same time. And then the finals game got scheduled, so I got to reschedule. So I believe it might be the same day, either before or after. We'll see. So should be 2 games on Friday. And then on Sunday, we have a T5S2 Invitational game. So lots of streaming going on this week. If you want more Warhamster 40,000 content, and I'll see you then. Thanks, everyone, for hanging out with me, and I will see you next up tomorrow. Cheers, everyone.